Welcome to all your four students at the Department of English. This is the course of drama, and this is the first of a series of lectures about the critical analysis of Becky's Waiting for Godot. This is an analysis of critical essay that is extracted from the book of Martin Esslin, The Theatre of the Absurd. Let's start with the intended learning outcomes, and these are the lessons that you should be learning after you have completed these lectures. So, the first of these intended learning outcomes is that by the end of the lecture you will have learned how to read a critical essay. As we said in class, this is the most important thing. As you for students, is a crucial knowledge for you to be able to read and analyze critical essays. As you have studied literature for 3 years now, you should be able to do that task. The second intended learning outcome is that you should understand the main themes and characters of the play, and after you have finished these lectures and after you have analyzed the essay, the themes and characters of the play will become even more evident for you. The third intended learning outcome is that by the end of the essay, by the end of these lectures, you will be able to understand the structure and the main issues in this essay. This is what we are going to do in these lectures, that we are going to analyze the essay and try to know how to read it in order to understand the critical ideas that it tackles about the play. Let's start from the structure of the essay. The essay is a long one. It's approximately 16 pages long, so students might get lost by the reading of the essay among the different topics and the themes that it touches on. So I have kind of outlined the essay in order for students to understand it more easily. The first thing in the essay, on page 45, the essay starts with a main argument, which the writer puts forward as that Waiting for Godot doesn't tell a story, but rather explores a static situation. This is the main argument, to which he gives some examples in order to support that argument. Then, on page 64, the writer discusses the play as a descendant from a tradition of comedy, and he also supports that by the idea of physical humor in the play, and he gives some examples also to prove the presence of the comic spirit and the humorous spirit in the play. On page 47, he turns to a very important topic to analyze the characters of the play, and he sees the characters not as single individuals, but rather complementary pairs. He applies that to Vladimir and Sergen, and then he applies that to Porzo and Lucky. And then he turns to a very important topic about the play, whether Godot means God or not, and the different explanations that people have put forward in order to understand the name and the meaning of Godot. But later he turns to another thing, and he warns us that the most important theme in the play is not Godot, but rather it is waiting, and so we shouldn't be dealing as much with Godot as we should be dealing with the idea of waiting. And with waiting come many sub-themes in the play. One of them is time, the other is self, how waiting is related to time, and how the movement of time influences the human self, and how this influence shapes our identity. It turns to another topic that is also related to time and waiting, which is the theme of change, and then he tends to prove that change in the play, although it is very important, it is an illusion. Another theme is hope, and it is very important of how the characters in the play are driven by hope, by waiting for Godot. Another thing in the hope that the play presents is the uncertainty of hope, and he presents that through mainly the story of the two thieves that we repeatedly touched on in class. He deals with the idea of hope, of salvation as a kind of chance, why some people are saved and the others are damned as a matter of mere chance, and then it turns to the unpredictability of God, that God also bestows grace on some people and punishes others also with no clear reason, as he does with the boys, and how this divides the humankind into two halves, those who are damned and those who are saved, again for no obvious reason. And then he turns to another topic through pages 55 and 56 of the play as a Christian play, whether the play is religious or anti-religious, and he gives interpretations, and he gives and puts forward argument for both interpretations, the play as a religious play and as an anti-religious play. One thing that is also related to religion and to waiting is the idea of suicide, and all the characters are waiting or using waiting or pretend to wait in order to avoid committing suicide. Another thing is that he tackles on page 57 is the idea of waiting as a Christian virtue, how maybe one explanation or interpretation in favor of the religious interpretation of the play is that Vladimir and Sergen are presented as superior to Puzzle and Lucky because Vladimir and Sergen have a purpose, which is waiting. They have an objective, while Puzzle and Lucky do not have anything, and they just roam aimlessly through the world. Another topic that he tackles on pages 58 to 60 is habits, and how we are using habits, and how characters are using habits of waiting, of talking endlessly in order to avoid facing their existential dilemma, in order to avoid facing the real human condition of suffering. And the talking about human suffering leads us to talk about existentialism, and the writer also mentions some parallels between the ideas in the play and the existentialism of Jean-Paul Sartre, but he also warns that we should not explain the play or consider the play as a manifesto of existentialist philosophy. And after that, pages 60 through 61, he concludes his essay by saying that the play is not a manifesto of any philosophy, that the play is a literary work that is self-contained and it is open to many interpretations, be they philosophical or psychological or religious or otherwise, and also that he puts forward his view about the play as a poem about change, a poem about time, a poem about habits, a poem about salvation, a poem about the paradox of change and stability, and about the paradox of absurdity and necessity. This is a very rough sketch of the ideas of the play, and I wish they would help you to read the play and to make sense of the too many details that the essay is presenting. Start with the introduction. We said that in the introduction the writer puts forward a view of the play, and in this you see he is saying that Waiting for Godot does not tell a story, but rather it explores a static situation. Nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes, it is awful. This is the main idea that he is putting forward, and he is also trying to say that from what we are seeing that there is no action, the play started from where it ended and ended where it started, and he also gives the example of the last two lines of each act where one of the characters says, well, shall we go, and the second says, yes, let's go, and they do not move, and this is by the end of Act 1, and how this is also repeated by the end of Act 2 with reverse order. And he is saying that although there are some differences between the acts, some reversals, so although, for example, Pose and Lucky appear in Act 1 and Act 2, in Act 2 they are different. We have Bozo, blind, and Lucky, dumb. But in spite of that, in spite of all the variation that we see between the two acts, the main thing that is recurrent in the play and that the play is dealing with is the idea of sameness, of this essential sameness between the two acts. So although there is some variation in what happens in Act 1 and Act 2, essentially it is the same. So that's why we return to the first idea that Waiting for Godot doesn't tell a story, it explores a static situation. And this is his main argument in the essay, and as we are going to see throughout the essay, he is from one time to another returning to this argument and tries to prove it and give some more examples in order to prove that point. So this is the first part of the lecture about the essay of Martin Aslan, and it will be followed by other parts in order to explore the full range of this essay. Thank you very much for listening.